Hi, I'm Mrs. Downing. So I've tried to film this video a lot of times and it's been really disjointed and weird when I've just recorded one long video and tried to edit it together, and then I keep forgetting things and not exploring points well enough. So what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna film a bunch of smaller videos and then edit those all together. So you may see rough transitions in this video between topics. But I think what that's going to allow me to do is explore all the topics more fully, because I've prepared everything I'm going to say about, this topic or this topic, and then I'm just going to say it to you. So I want to start out by talking about Marxism, about analyzing it from a Marxist perspective. So I'm not going to talk too much about this because it's what my discussion post was about, and I'm not just going to restate my discussion post to you, but I do have this, and I kind of read it a little bit for my discussion post, and I want to point out one specific quote from it. It's on page 36, and it is, "The bourgeoisie have stripped of its halo every occupation hitherto honored and looked up to with reverent awe." So, what I think this applies to Death of a Salesman is that Willie always says that he likes being a salesman because it's an honorable profession where he can meet people. He can go into any city and they'll know his name. Let me find a page number real quick. So the page I was looking for was 31, because on that page he says, "America is full of beautiful towns and fine upstanding people, and they know me, boys. They know me up and down New England, the finest people." And he goes on about how much people like him. So that's why he says he likes the job. But there's a conflict because he still values his work that he puts in at the firm based on how much money he can get. So for example, on page 16, he calls his son a lazy bum because he has yet to make $35 a week, even though his son is working very hard. In Willie's opinion, what he knows of what his son is doing to make money, his son is working very hard and it's honest work, but he's not making enough money, so it's not valuable work. And in this way, you can kind of see all these honest professions like salesman that you think of as a very nice profession to have. If someone's a salesman, you're like, ooh, a salesman. But it all goes down to how much money you make. It's not that he's a salesman, it's that he's a successful salesman who can make money, or he's an unsuccessful salesman who can't make money. So all these glorious professions are just stripped down to how much money you can make. And I think that's why Arthur Miller chooses to never explicitly reveal what it is that Willie is selling, because it doesn't matter. You can assume that he's selling at some point. I thought there was a line that insinuated he was selling watches, but I don't think that that's a thing in the book. It doesn't matter if he's selling watches, let's say, which in that case you're like, ooh, a nice salesman. He goes and he sells people watches. Or if he's a snake oil salesman. It doesn't matter what product he's selling. It doesn't matter the actual connection that he's making with these people over their need for a product. What matters is that they will pay for the product, I think that Arthur Miller is trying to say there's no difference between a paper salesman, a watch salesman, a radio salesman, or a snake oil salesman, a con artist, because you're still making the same connections with the people and you're still making the same amount of money, and probably more if you're conning people low-key. Also, I just wanted to point out that I don't think it's bad to be a communist in and of itself, but I definitely see why Arthur Miller was accused of being a communist. When all that I knew about him was wrote The Crucible because he was accused of being a communist, I was like, oh, that's a fun literary fact. Why would they accuse someone of being a communist? That's so crazy. But I can see Arthur Miller writing Death of a Salesman with his personal copy of the Communist Manifesto right next to him, I'm not accusing him of being a communist, I'm not saying anything. He doesn't need to write, the sequel to The Crucible for me, but I'm just saying. I'm just saying. And now we're done with the Marxist perspective, and we're moving on to whatever I decide to talk about next, which is Biff's character analysis. So, I think that Biff is one of the most interesting characters in Death of a Salesman because of a lot of things. First off, I want to talk about who is a foil to him. I think that Happy is originally thought to be a foil to him that makes him look bad. You know, Happy is the younger brother, but he's more successful, and Biff is less successful, and so it kind of makes Biff look, you know, more like lazy or whatever. It's support for Willie's claims that Biff is a lazy bum. But eventually you find out that they're really the same because they're both Lomans. They're both not really successful at all. Because Happy gave me the impression that he kind of like worked at a Staples. Like, he was one of the employees of a Staples, and one day he thought he would be like the CEO or something. That's the impression he gave me about what his job is. And Biff's theft problem can be compared to Happy's whole thing with the wives of his bosses, which I will get into when I talk about machismo and competition. And also Happy's lying can be compared to Biff's theft problem because, you know, they both kind of involve some level of deceit. When you compare this to Bernard, Bernard is a foil of Biff that only gets more and more, like they only go down paths that are more and more diverging as they grow up. So, Bernard was originally thought to be a character who's a foil to Biff that makes him look good. Like, oh, here's Bernard, and he's the stupid little anemic boy who doesn't have any friends, and here's Biff, and he's the football player. But eventually you find out that Biff only had, like, football and being kind of nice, and that that's not enough to succeed in the world, and that you need to be a little Bernard. And I think you can really see them being foils in the scene where Willie begs Bernard for advice about, you know, how did you make it? How did you become so successful? It's a really sad image of Willie begging this man who's so young and so, like, put together, and it's just this distraught salesman. And the next scene, like, the very next scene, he is preparing to get disappointed by his son because his son didn't succeed and because he lied to his son, and now it's all coming back. I also want to talk about Biff's theft problem. This is the one that I have been thinking a lot about, how, like, what you can read from Biff's theft problem, and I'm not exactly sure, but my theory is that it can be compared to Howard and Happy's theft problem. So I've already established Happy's theft problem. Howard, I wouldn't exactly call it stealing as much as it's, like, just being really mean. Like, having someone work for you and not paying them is kind of stealing, like, and also Howard's just not a good person. Theft goes on a lot in the business world, I think, is in Death of a Salesman. So, you know, Happy stealing the wives or whatever. Howard kind of he kind of steals what's supposed to be Willie's spot in the company, you know, because Howard's dad promised Willie that he would have a good spot in the company, and then that didn't happen. Something interesting, actually, is I just went back and I read the scene because I was like, I want to find the page number so I can provide textual evidence. And it never tells you in this book what explicitly was promised to Willie by Howard's dad. I'll call him Howard Sr. So on page 82, Willie says, I averaged $170 a week in the year of 1928, and your father came to me, or rather, I was in his office here, it was right over this desk, and he put his hand on my shoulder, and then, you know, Howard leaves, and Willie says, Frank is his name, Frank, don't you remember what you told me that time? You put your hand on my shoulder, and Frank, and then he turns on the, recorder on accident. That's on page 82, and, I think it's interesting. It makes you wonder if it was another delusion of Willie's, like a delusion of grandeur that, you know, he thought, I'm the greatest salesman in the world, I'm averaging this much money, and now he promised to make me the owner of the company one day. But I don't think it was. I don't think it was a a romanticization or a fabrication by Willie. I think that that was actually promised to him, because I believe Willie that in the olden days it was really nicer and better for Salesman and more sociable. And I'll get into that. I will get into isolation later. But I just wanted to say that I thought that was really interesting that you never actually see what exactly and how much Howard has stolen or lied or deceived or just kind of ignored the wishes of his father, because you don't know what the wishes of his father were in relation to Will. But Biff ends up in jail because he wasn't in the business world. He was in like the out west world. But he was raised to be in the business world, so he was kind of raised to be successful at any cost, and then he finds out that that doesn't really apply when you're not a salesman and when you're just like a farmer. He was also taught that theft is initiative on page 30 when he steals the football, and his dad's like, that's good initiative, your coach is going to applaud you. It's the theme of doing whatever it takes to get ahead, even if it's stealing from someone or directly preventing someone else from getting ahead, in the case of stealing the football, because now no one else can practice while you have it because you stole it and you took it from them. It is kind of like, it is initiative in a way. Like, you're really trying to get yourself ahead and you don't care what the cost is or whatever, but it works out in a way for Happy and Howard that it doesn't work out for Biff, because Biff doesn't want to go into the business world. He wants to go into the rural, whatever, the West. And then he gets arrested and he goes to jail because he's trying to apply what works in the cutthroat business world to the nicer, calmer world of the West. And I think that's interesting. I think that it contributes to his downfall in a way, that he steals the pen, and that's the big thing. That he is just trying his best to apply his misunderstandings of the business world in the situation that's just really not good. I also want to talk more, this is where I'm going off what I've planned to say, so it might cut around a lot, but I want to talk more about Biff, his realization that he was not a salesman, that he was a, like, stock boy, I think. Yeah, he was a stock boy for the man, the boss. Let me find the name. Bill Oliver is the man. I think it's really interesting that Biff, who is kind of our viewpoint character, he's the one that sees through the cracks in the family and sees through the lies in the family. And I think that's because he's not so involved in the business world, that he doesn't have his entire reputation based on, like, how good of a salesman his dad was. And in a way that's because he's lost so much. He doesn't feel like he's part of that society anymore because he's stigmatized. He's a lazy bum, or he's, a farmhand and not good for anything, or he's a jailbird, He's not part of that society anymore, so he can look out at it and criticize it. He says that he was always a stock boy, and Willie just said he was a salesman, and then the lie kind of he started to believe it. I think that's really interesting because you can kind of see that in Willie. Like, he lies to himself a lot, and then he starts to believe it. He lies to Happy because he tells him, you're the successful kid, and Biff is the unsuccessful kid. But Happy's not successful either, neither of them are. The Lomans just aren't. And I think that serves to show how sad Willie is. I think it's just, there's a point where, in my opinion, Death of a Salesman goes away from, like, trying to take apart the business world and society, like the Marxist perspective, of, like, blaming capitalism or whatever. And there's a point where I think it just goes to, like, point at this sad man who is sad. And I know it's deeper than that because this is a literary work and stuff. But it does eventually just go and point to this man who's like, look, he doesn't want to work and he's so sad. Look, he's begging. Isn't that sad? Oh, his son isn't good. And I don't know. I think it might just be that reality is too hard for him. He is 60. He shouldn't be working anymore. I don't know. I'm gonna go plan what I'm gonna say next when I come back, because this is a 10-minute clip. Yeah, this is just a side note. I'm not exactly comfortable with the scene where Willie denies the job, because it kind of implies that Willie doesn't want to work for his money, which I didn't get at all from the rest of the narrative. Only that scene really, like, he spends a lot of time away from his kids when they're growing up. He misses a lot to try to work, and I think that he doesn't want to adjust to the new world that he sees. He definitely has a problem with that, but I was really uncomfortable with this scene, the one where Charlie offered him a job, which is scene, like, it's on 93 and 95. But well, that's off topic. So, okay, I want to talk about Willie, his obsession with the past and how things were better then. And why I believe that things were better then, and that's, like, the one thing he's not delusional about, is that everyone used to be nicer, and that the death of a salesman used to be something different. I think that the amount of concrete examples he proves, like, in and of itself, that, you know, it used to be different. But I think we also have to consider how much had changed in Willie's lifetime due to the Great Depression. The old salesmen had, like, a lot less to combat, and they were in a time of extreme buying. Like, the 20s is a time of extreme purchases, and then you see the 30s, where now they have to think about not losing money, and that affected everyone. And also, I think that just the collective trauma that they were going through would have a huge impact on the rest of your life. Like, I saw a post recently online on Instagram that was that I'm going to use in my I think summative English project, but it said, "My grandparents lived through the Depression and spent the rest of their lives stuffing cash into the mattress and hoarding old egg cartons in the garage. So I can't wait to find out what weird neuroses I'm going to pick up over the next few years." And I hate to make this about, like, Corona, but the world, and we saw this in the introductory materials, became a lot more cruel and cold and harsh after the Great Depression, and the business world also changed to reflect that. And I think that the cutthroat business world and hoarding of wealth may, in the case of Howard and some of the other characters in this book, be leftovers of those harsher times. And this deepens the social commentary when you consider that the Great Depression was kind of a result of consumerism and of salesmen pushing on, like, you know, now with credit cards, just buy things you can't pay for, and then they did, and then that happened. But yeah, I think that when we go through a big collective trauma as a society, it changes every individual person, and it changes the society at large, and I will talk about that next. I've seen in myself too this, like, reflexive need to, like, stockpile things recently. So I'm starting to run out of things that I'm, like, that I have no way to get right now. So I want to learn how to make dice for D&D. I just got this pair of dice. I got these. They're very pretty. They have, like, little flowers in them. I promise this is gonna be drawn back to Death of a Salesman. I want to learn how to start making dice myself, and I have the molds to make dice. Like, I have everything I need. I just don't have resin to cast the molds in. And I was thinking, like, oh, when we can go outside again to stores that would have resin, I should buy, like, 2 bottles and then not use one of them, and that's my, like, reserve, and then just have one that I use. And I was thinking, like, oh, so if this ever happens again, I can be prepared. But, like, this is not gonna happen again. Like, this is an insane weird thing, and it's probably not going to happen again in my lifetime for a long time. And so I think I already have a problem with buying things that, you know, I don't need, and I'm not gonna use. I haven't read that book or 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 that book. I've read that book. And I will have my reduction of that book in soon, but I have not read most of those. It's gonna affect me for the rest of my life. I know that. But it's weird reading things right now. I've been reading a lot, and I've been finding everything very, very applicable right now in like a weird way. Like I'm reading a book where the way it's structured is it tells you how many days until the deadline of May 1st, decision day, because it's about like high schoolers and drama, and it's just becoming so much weirder when you can see that it's happening on the same days and they're like going to school. You know, I don't know, a lot of things in books are just becoming a lot more weirdly, darkly applicable right now, and I think that this is one of them that we can see firsthand, and it's sad and dark to say, but I guess it's a good learning tool for Death of a Salesman, a good instruction tool. I think when collectively we as a society go through something like a huge event like this, like a big historical event, it changes your psyche so deeply, and I never really understood that before, I guess, like, because I was born after 9/11, so I wasn't alive during that. The recession, I was too young to really understand. It's kind of scary that these big events are happening closer and closer, I feel like, together. But yeah, I don't know. I had never understood before, and now I kind of understand it better, I guess. That you would definitely see the need to create distance, I guess, between yourself and your local salesman. That salesmen would be less welcome, that they would be less successful, that you would start valuing people as only how much money they could make as a response to not making any money for a long time, and then your family is put on the line. I mean, in the scene on page like 81, 82, the one with him and Howard, the scene, he is talking to Howard, and Howard is saying business is business, and he's like, yes, I agree, business is business, but I'm a human. Howard has a family to provide for, and you hear his family talking in the scene. And I think that it's easy to see that the current system we have right now, not to get too but the system that exists in Death of a Salesman of selling and buying and everything is going to lead to these cutthroat things, because you have to depend on your employees' ability to earn money so that your family can survive. And it ends up just leaving people like Willy Loman in the dirt. There's or the dust. There's something really interesting I realized when I was thinking about the characters, and it's that you can divide the characters into have and have-nots. And if you do that, what you're going to find is that pretty much everyone in this book who is not a Loman is in the have category. Howard, you have Bernard, you have Ben, you have what are other Charlie is at least financially stable enough to offer to be giving the Loman so much money. The only characters I can think of that aren't like rich are maybe the woman that Willie cheats on his wife with. Maybe, but I mean, Spencer, the like waiter, even the like girls that Happy and Biff talk to in the restaurant are kind of like, they're models, so you're assuming that they're going to get some money. They're a little bit more well-to-do. And I think that kind of just goes to show that we have a system that only helps you if you're well off, and then there's really no way to get back up from under. it can be extremely isolating when you're the only one who's going through a really hard time and everyone else around you is not. It's just very, very isolating and dehumanizing. And Willie is dehumanized. I mean, in this scene, a man is not a piece of fruit. He's being made to feel like he's less than human. When you look around you and all you see are other people who are wealthy. So Howard has all these friends and you assume that they're wealthy. Bernard, he's like playing tennis. He's not playing tennis with like local school children because he really cares about impacting the lives of people. Like, he's playing tennis with rich friends. When you look around and you only see people who are successful, you don't help out other people. You fire the people that aren't making a lot of money. And so you don't ever meet anyone who doesn't make a lot of money. It's really easy to think that, you know, I'm here because I have something that no one else has. And if you're fired because of you. You know, that's your fault. You should have made more money for the company then. It's really easy to say that when you don't have anyone who's a counterexample right there. And you can see that especially in the scene with Bernard, where on page 95, he says, if at first you don't succeed, Bernard says that. Then Willie says, yes, I believe that, Bernard. But sometimes, Willie, it's better for a man to just walk away. Willie, walk away? Bernard, that's right, Willie. But if you can't walk away, Bernard, I guess that's when it's tough. And then he shakes Willie's hand, and then, you know. And Charlie always, like, wants to avoid talking to Willie, you know. They're trying to avoid the question of what do you do when you can't walk away and when you've tried and you've tried again. And they don't know the answer. There isn't really an answer because what you do is you die. That's why he dies. That's the death of a salesman. Like, you're successful or you die. And that's why I think I'm so uncomfortable with the next scene where Willie rejects work, because it kind of proves Bernard right. Like, you know, if first you don't succeed, try again. And Willie's like, I believe that, but then he's not willing to accept another job. And I just don't understand why that choice was made by Arthur Miller. Like, I don't, I think he might be trying to say that Willie is choosing not to work, but that doesn't make sense with like a lot of the other, at least the way that I interpreted like the entire rest of the thing. So it's really confusing. I don't understand that scene at all. And I will ask about it on the Zoom conference because I don't get it. Yeah. Hi, the last thing that I want to discuss is I want to briefly talk about gender in Death of a Salesman. So a lot can be said about machismo and how that influences the male characters in the play. Happy. The whole thing about Happy sleeping with the wives of his bosses, I think it shows a lot of things. I think it shows an early indication that he's not a good person. So that's kind of foreshadowing, but it's also his competition that he sees with the men that he works with is to do with money and machismo. Money because he wants to earn more money to be more successful. Also, I think he wants to fit the role he sees a man fitting, which is the big money earner, the big powerful, strong man who has power. And how do you get power over your boss without losing your job? You do something in secret they're never going to know about. That involves being masculine and strong. He just wants to feel happy about himself and powerful and strong and manly. And that's machismo and competition. Willie also says a lot of things. He calls Charlie disgusting. It's on page 44. A man who can't handle tools is not a man. You're disgusting. Charlie says, don't call me disgusting, Willie. Like, bro. He's constantly thinking about, you know, who is and who is not a man. And I think that a lot of times you see men taking power over women in this play, with Happy using these women as a pawn in the whole game he's playing of getting ahead. And also Willie, the way that he treats Linda, his loving wife, who is so nice to him and so sweet and who genuinely loves him so much. He has no reason to cheat on her. He is lonely, but like, she wants him home more. Like, no reason to cheat on her, and I don't like that he did cheat on her. I think it was a weird decision, and I don't know why it was made on Arthur Miller's part, like the author. I don't understand why he just said that, why he did that. But I think you can look at the way Linda is treated by her sons and by her husband all throughout this play as commentary on the treatment of women in society. So Biff says on page 55, he says, "Stop making excuses for him. He always wiped the floor with you. Never had an ounce of respect for you." And that was really interesting to me because you first get introduced to Linda, and, you know, she's a very loving woman, and you get the sense that Willie loves her and treats her well, but he just cheats on her. And it's, you know, it's an unfortunate thing, but she never has to find out about it. He treats her really well. He always says to the kids, you know, go help your mother, and you know, it's kind of like a nice family in that sense. But now Biff is saying that he never had any respect for her. He always wiped the floor with her. And you see that in Willie's interactions with his wife. He's always yelling, "Don't interrupt," when she's asking perfectly legitimate questions about business. Because, you know, him and his sons are talking. And it's like, it feels very much like, don't talk to us. This is a man conversation. And it's very hypocritical. He says, like, don't interrupt me all the time to her. He yells at her constantly about interrupting him. But then he, in Biff's, when he's talking to Biff and he's on page 108 and trying to hear how the meeting wound up, he's constantly interrupting and asking questions that are weird, and yeah, yeah. I also think that there was a line that stopped me when Biff comes in and he's talking to, when Biff and Happy come in and they are talking to their mom, Linda, and Linda goes to pick up the flowers that they dropped, and Linda says, "You know what? No, I'm not picking this up. You go pick it up. You take it out because I'm not your maid anymore." And that is on page... She says that on page 124. She says, "I'm not your maid anymore," which kind of implies that that's the role she sees herself filling in her life. She is not their loving mother as much as she is their maid. She lets them live in their house, you know, whatever. And I think that that's... I would normally critique a mother for being that rude to her children because she chose to have them, but in this case, they are living in her house and then disrespecting her, not following her rules. She's been very patient with them. She's a very loving mother. I think she definitely reflects the blame from Biff to Willie too much, but, you know, what can you do? I also saw an interesting line when I was looking for it. Also on 124, Linda said, "Did you have to go to women tonight? You and your lousy, rotten whores." And, I think that this might have something to do. I think someone in the process of Death of a Salesman, like in the process of writing it, maybe this is Arthur Miller, or maybe this is Linda, or maybe this is Biff and Happy, or all the characters. I think somebody has a Madonna whore complex. I really do. Where you're unable to see women as different from the archetype of either like an angel, like a very virtuous woman, or a whore. And that's a thing in literature. There's the two kinds of women. I think that that's present in this play, and I don't like it that much. And I think it's Arthur Miller. I think it's an Arthur Miller thing. Because Linda's a very nice character, and there is the little bit of commentary on gender, how you know, she says, it's nice and I appreciate that. But I think that the amount of perfection that that Linda has, and the amount of like personality that is not given to anyone else. Another thing that I think might be commentary on gender, or might be Arthur Miller like peeking through, is that the woman that that Willie cheats on his wife with is never given a name. And I think that's really interesting because names are kind of meaningful in this book. You have Willie, who's really childish, and he's always been told that he's childish, and his name is Willie, which is kind of childish. Bernard sounds like an anemic. Happy is the more, he just wants to deflect from everything. He never wants to, he never wants to take accountability or responsibility, but he doesn't ever want anything to go wrong, and so he kind of just says, let's pretend everything's perfect. He gets that from his dad and his mom. He also is named he's named Harold in real life, which is very similar to Howard. So when you find out his name is really Harold, I instantly thought of Willie said, I gave you the name Howard. He also gave Happy the name Harold. They're very similar, and I think that Howard and Happy are kind of similar because they're both a little bit ruthless and a little bit mean because they just want to get on top, and that's all they really care about, and they don't care about people and whatever. Yeah, names are a really important part of this book. Even Spencer, like the waiter, is given a name, but the woman that Willie cheats on his wife for and that Biff leaves home for is never given a name, and I think that's either an oversight or I think that it's because he doesn't care about her personality at all. He's really just using her for I don't even know what, because he has a loving wife who he sees not too unregularly. He is just using her. She's just like an object to him. And then maybe commentary on that. Last thing I want to say, last thing, and then I'll let you go. Something that I really like about the last scene in the play, all of Willie's funeral, is that Arthur Miller makes all of us the grave. So when they're looking at his grave, when they're standing at his grave, they're standing on the edge of the stage and they're looking out at the audience, like literally the edge, like they're at the edge of the apron, like it's the edge of the stage, looking out at the audience, and they're saying, "Wow, look, that's my dad's grave," and they're pointing at you. And I think that that's interesting because it's like the last little note of the play, and it puts direct accountability on the audience and on the society that we live in. It says, you standing there. You need to consider what the death of Willie Loman means to you. Would you have gone to his funeral? Like, would you have cared about him? You need to consider that. You need to think about it. This is what we live in right now. And so I really like the decision from Arthur Miller. I will end by complimenting him because I think that everything that I really, really liked Death of a Salesman. Conclusion things, my thoughts and opinions, I really liked it. It was really good. It made me really sad. Like, it made me cry, and books don't usually make me cry. So, I really liked it a lot. It was very interesting and good. The only thing I will say is that someone has a Madonna whore complex. I don't know if it's Arthur Miller. I don't know if it's Willie Loman. Someone does. That's my only critique. And also that I don't like that one scene where he rejects the work from Charlie. Because I just don't like how it fits in with the narrative. But other than that, I really, really liked it. And both of those might be me misunderstanding something or me applying character flaws to Arthur Miller. But, yeah, I don't know. I really, really liked Death of a Salesman. I want to find, like, the movie and watch it, or find a show and watch it, because, you know, drama's meant to be seen and not heard. And I'll be doing that because I'll have a lot of free time after I finish up my schoolwork. So, yeah. Thank you, and goodbye, and I'll see you on Zoom.